The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner, because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run, or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still lights of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry armed women liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Keys, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, Engelbert Humperdinck, or The Rare Earth. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with Coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
All right. Top of the morning, top of the evening, top of the night, whatever time zone you are on, we are live. Hello, everybody. See something really quick. Okay. To get out of this one. Hopefully everybody's been doing the best that they can in the situation that they are in. Let's hit this moment of silence really quick. Okay. All right. So, moment of silence for all those who had lost their lives. You see the title. We're gonna let the record show tariffs equals Trump's Great Depression and trade wars. Again, I'm can't overstress this. We are on the precipice of a Great Depression, and when you view this in the future, information will be here. But y'all ready to go ahead and get to this information? Yeah, I am too. But before we get to this information, yeah, let's get the adrenaline going a little bit more, just a little bit more. Oh, care for this one. Y'all ready? Let me wake y'all up a little bit. right,
This
let's
party
go.
started quickly.
Wake you up a little
Right,
bit.
set it off, I suggest y'all. Set it off, I suggest y'all. Set it off, set it off, set it off on the left, y'all. Set it off on the right, y'all. Set it off. Come on, let's set it off. Y'all want this party started quickly. Right? Set it off, I suggest y'all. Set it off, I suggest y'all. Set it off, set it off. Come on, let's set it off. Set it off. On the left, start. On the right, start. On the left, I suggest while we're left, start. On the left, start. On the right, start. On the left, I suggest while we're left, start. Set it off, I suggest y'all. Set it off, I suggest y'all. Set it off, set it off. Come on, let's set it off. Set it off on the left, y'all. Set it off on the right, y'all. Set it off. From spark to flame, a little flame can. Desire's burning. Live us this day. You want to party? Come on, you got me. Out on the dance floor. We're all out to play.
Oh,
We'll share our secrets. Love talk is spreading. A little love is fun.
let's go.
Give us this day to show our gratitude, to change our attitudes. Come on, we're many. With all that we feel, the time is ideal to set it off. I suggest y'all set it off. I suggest y'all set it off. Come on, let's set it off. Set it off on the left, y'all. Set it off on the right, y'all. Set it off. Come on, let's set it off. Set it off. Oh.
All right, let's set it off with this information. All right, y'all ready to rock? Ready to set it off with this info? Let's go. Let's get into it. All right. So again, hopefully everybody's been doing the best that they can in the situation that they are in. Break this volume down just a little bit. I don't need to be that loud. All right. So let's get right into it. You see the title. So it is tariffs. It is which equals trade war, which equals this Great Depression. Remember, I said we'll be comparing and contrasting. And let's go. So there's an equation, there's a formula in the way that you are supposed to calculate um, the export and the imports of trade pertaining to goods and services. Nevertheless, Pinocchio, number one, and we all know that's Don the Con, as I refer to him, has decided uh, to do their own thing, which is going to be extremely caustic. And I've heard people attempting to justify his rationale on having uh, schizophrenic type of decisions, national decisions going on, um, which lead to international impact. And the rationale just does not work for me. And it is irrational, it's illogical, and it absolutely um, didn't make any sense. Nonsense, right? It was nonsense. And we believe in no nonsense over here. No nonsense, no foolishness, um, no justification. Let's go. Let's get to this first video. Then I'm going to get to my PowerPoint. Then we're going to get back into my another video. And then we're going to get back into my PowerPoint. So let's go. Cue it up. Let's get off into this. We said we was coming with. We're going to let the record show, right? Comparison, contrasting things that happened in the Great Depression versus things that are happening now. Why I said we're on the precipice of a Great Depression. So let me do the share on this. Apologies for any loud clicks in the background. Yeah, I could optimize it, but I am not. I'm just going to do it like this right here. All right, so here we go.
President Trump's auto tariffs are here, and that means
a 25% on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
But no car, not even a US-built Ford F-150, is 100% US-made. Just look inside.
It's made up of thousands and thousands of parts. Those parts come from over 24 different countries.
Countries like Mexico, Canada, Romania. Trump wants these parts to say made in the US. But moving all of this is not so simple.
To lift and shift that whole thing, that's kind of like saying, oh, pick up the state of Maine and move it over to Wyoming. Could you do it? I suppose you could, but man, it would be tough duty.
So let's break it down to understand what Trump is trying to do with a slew of new tariffs and why automakers are warning it could backfire. This chart shows where cars sold in the US are coming from. All of these cars now face that 25% auto tariff. But this 53% of US-made cars is also affected by that tariff because of all of those foreign parts.
Some of the major components, this is for the Ford F-150. They have an alternator, create current. It's from Mexico. We have half shafts. These deliver torque to the wheels from the driveline. They're from Canada. We have tires, of course, 5 of them.
Canada, Mexico, Korea.
Of course, you have to have wheels. In this case, a styled, attractive wheels. These all come from Mexico.
Those tires from South Korea would face that auto tariff and any reciprocal or universal tariff placed on the country. Those parts from Canada and Mexico, well, that's where it gets more complicated. Eventually, they would face that auto tariff, any reciprocal or universal tariff, and an additional Mexico-Canada tariff. But the White House said parts compliant with the US-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, or USMCA, remain tariff-free until there is a process to apply tariffs to their non-US content. And for some parts, like a transmission, there will be a lot of content to consider.
When you realize what goes into an automatic transmission, that's what this is. And so you can see this plethora of parts, gears and seals, springs, fasteners, valves, and shafts, all these different parts. They can come from different suppliers, and those suppliers can be located
now let me pause right there for a minute. I used to work for GM, and so shout out to V8. If you work for GM or work for any manufacturing company, shout out to you. I used to work for V8 engine plant, powertrain plant. Okay, and so I'm understanding the breakdown of parts. Okay, so when you're looking at every component and each individual part, and you're saying to yourself, this part comes from here, this part comes from Mexico, this part comes from Canada, this part comes from Taiwan, this part comes from Korea, this part comes from here, this part comes from there, this part comes from here. None of the parts come from the United States. 100%. They're coming from other places. This person, 25% tariff. This person, 35% tariff. This person, 10% tariff. This person, 24% tariff. You're starting a trade war. I'm just letting the record show. Let me let the finish.
Take a look at this map showing how Canadian manufacturer Linamar creates transmissions for the US market today. It takes 7 border crossings before that part is in a car being sold in the US. These 3 crossings into the US would eventually face Trump tariffs. And even if the manufacturing of all of this was moved into the US, this part, the raw steel, would still be subject to Trump's 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum.
This is going to be disruptive on day one. It's going to increase the cost of doing business.
The total amount depends on the vehicle. A Cox Automotive estimate shows a car made in the US would incur $3,000 in costs from the Canada-Mexico tariffs, plus another $3,000 from the tariffs on foreign-made auto parts. Then research shows an added $400 for the steel and aluminum tariffs, and more for any reciprocal or universal tariffs.
Have you heard any concerns from the automakers,
Let
though,
me
about
pause
the tariffs
again.
on parts?
Who's going to bear the brunt of the cost? It's every manufacturer or retail company. Are they going to pick up the cost of these tariffs? Because tariffs is not just in the auto industry. It is hitting straight across the board for all market, food, clothes. It's hitting housing. It's hitting tourism. It's hitting agriculture. We've seen this before in the historically, 1920s and 30s. What caused the onset of the Great Depression, which we'll get to in the PowerPoint. Comparing and contrasting. This is unnecessary. This is irrational. Yeah, the precipice of a Great Depression. The decline of the USA. The further decline of the USA.
That will go into effect over the coming weeks, about what that's going to mean for the price of
Well, I gave
American
them a big
cars.
break for a month. I didn't charge them anything, for a big month, for that first month, and they brought a lot of material into this country because they could bring it in without tariff.
But eventually, added production costs could change what cars buyers.
Who's bringing products into the United States without tariffs? That's a lie. So let me say that and put that on record, because we're not going to roll with foolishness. This is straight no nonsense, not style. Letting the record show. Let's roll.
See on dealer lots.
You can see a stop in production of a number of vehicles, some of which are very important to some of the automakers.
Trump's goal, however, is to pressure automakers to make them in the U.S. instead.
This is going to lead to the construction of a lot of plants.
And the White House said the duties on Canada and Mexico are also meant to disrupt the drug trade.
We've lost millions of people due to fentanyl. It comes mostly from China, but it comes through Mexico and it comes through Canada.
Pause
The
for a
trade group
minute,
representing-
because Canada ran their stacks and Mexico ran their stacks on fentanyl too. And it is not their fault that people in the United States have addiction problems, okay? First of all, fentanyl was first introduced in the U.S. the 1950s. I'll pull it back again because we're going to let the record show. The 1950s, and he's deflecting, spin and deflect. The rationale that he's given for tariffs, what does that have to do with a medical pandemic or emergency? Okay, what does that have to do? Are we trading? What are we talking about here? Spin and deflect. Stay focused. See, So you heard the spin and deflection, and if you didn't, let me clearly point it out. That's deflecting. They're asking you questions about trade. Fentanyl was developed in the 1950s and introduced into US society in the 1960s. So let's be clear about that. Let's let the record show, let's get that on record. Fentanyl crisis started happening in the 1990s. Let's get that on record. Let's be clear about that. Let me continue to play the clip.
Ford, GM, and Stellantis said it's critical that tariffs are done in a way that preserves the competitiveness of the North American auto sector. North American is the key there. Because of the Trump negotiated USMCA and NAFTA before it, automakers have essentially viewed these countries as borderless.
We have really built the industry around that free trade zone that's existed for so long.
It's why Mexico and Canada exported about $75 billion in passenger cars and more than $100 billion in auto parts to the US last year. So shrinking supply chains to just the US?
If you had to move production of a vehicle or even a complex system like an engine, a transmission, an axle, and you're making that in Canada or you're making that in Mexico and you just want to move the plant, that could be years.
Analysts say even shifting a foreign-made part to a US supplier can take months.
We have well-established, very detailed testing plans for every component on a vehicle, and we don't get to skip those just because we might want to or it might be easy, right? Because it's a safety and quality issue. It costs money and it costs lives when we get those things wrong.
So either choice, moving production or facing the tariffs,
Let me
come with
pause
added
again
costs.
and let the record show. Quality assurance, safety, all of that matters. Years ago in my 20s, when I was working for V8 powertrain plant, one of the GM manufacturing plants, we spent weeks of going over safety. And in those safety classes, what they kept stressing over and over is you are not safe. You have to work in a manner where you're following safety regulations, because if you don't, you can die. That's one of the, I'm letting the record show. That's one of the things years ago when I was in my 20s or worked there, that they spent their time in those training classes in our intro before we even went out into the facility. We had to sit, and yes, it was paid for. They paid for us to go sit through the training. So yeah, who's factoring all this stuff? So you get a person who's not thinking rational, irrational. You're not thinking of a plan. And people thought he was a good businessman. No, what you get ready to do, he's getting ready to walk us into a Great Depression. And so I'm gonna change the title, because I'm walking the US into a Great Depression. You start this foolishness here with these trade wars, we're not gonna be in a recession. We're going back into a Great Depression. And it's going to be man-made. All right.
Some of which economists say will be passed on to consumers. That will push up already elevated car prices. This could then tamp down demand and slow production.
If there's less production, there'll be less demand for workers in the North American auto industry. Even before you get the cut in profitability, there'll probably be a push for more labor-saving investment in U.S. production to try to compensate for the increased costs elsewhere in the production process.
That labor-saving investment, analysts say, will come in the form of automation.
When you move production to the U.S., you do it, because you need to be close, but it doesn't necessarily bring a lot of jobs with it. It brings a lot of automation.
But the United Auto Workers Union applauded Trump's tariff on foreign autos, adding it's now on the automakers to bring back good union jobs
And let
to
me
the
pause
US.
that right there, because the consensus on that was split. Yeah. Okay. Let me finish.
make investments months or years into the future, automakers need
certainty and stability. Just they want it to be clear what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and why it's going to happen.
But automakers are still waiting for clarity on the extent and application of the various tariffs, especially after the pause and then temporary exemption from the Mexico-Canada tariffs.
The uncertainty of whether and how long these tariffs will stick around is creating real dollars waste in terms of warehousing and trucking, and call it soft waste, time, energy, wasted attention that could be better deployed building and designing the next vehicle, the next system.
That time spent debating if this alternator should continue to come from Mexico or this crossbeam from Canada is to some a distraction from the larger disruptors in the industry, namely the fast-moving Chinese competition. China is now the world's largest vehicle exporter.
Very tumultuous time in the industry, for sure. Things are changing faster than they ever did before. And at the end of the day, you have to remember, it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And so, whatever you are, don't be the slowest. Move quickly.
Who's exporting the most vehicles now? China. Who revolutionized the world industrial? Who revolutionized the world when it came to the auto industry? It was the US. We used to and I'm watching this. Come on, Zoom. Hey, Casey, how are you? Oh, wow. So, there we go. I thought I was going to have to restart the stream. I was having flashbacks. I was having flashbacks when YouTube used to stop my stream. Okay. How's everybody doing in the chat? All right. So we're going to, now I'm going to pull up my presentation because, again, what we seen on there was some deflecting, right? And so I want to say again on this side note, because Trump started deflecting in that video footage when they were asking him questions about trade, all right, and tariffs, right? Tariffs, which deals with the import exports being brought in and out of a nation or a country, right? Products that are exported to other nations and products that are imported. So he began to spin and deflect and bring in fentanyl. And so I want to say again, fentanyl was developed in the 1950s, was introduced to the US in the 1960s. Okay, fentanyl crisis of the 1990s. So fentanyl is not a new medical conversation or medical crisis. All right. So why are we spending it when we're talking about tariffs? Why are we talking about tariffs? Because you think with your irrational argument that fentanyl is coming in from this nation, so we got to put tariffs on it. We already have tariffs imposed. Yeah, that made absolutely no sense. Okay, so we have to let the record show that that nonsense and foolishness is out of order. All right, let me refresh my PowerPoint. Let me refresh my PowerPoint. Here we go. Refresh. Okay, all right. There we go. Refresh, refresh. Let's launch this. Thank you for your patience. I am refreshing my presentation. That is in the background. And so we're going to get to the disclaimers. Disclaimer: parental consent is advised. Graphic content may be presented. Disclaimer. Okay. Come on and load. Load, 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 load. There we go. Load this up. Take it out in. All right. And so since I'm at the last page of my presentation, I'm going to take this back to the beginning, and then I'm going to do the share screen. Oh, that's number one. All right. Okay. Share. And if you hear clicks in the background, apologies, everyone. All right. Parental consent is advised. Graphic content may be presented. I've already gone over that. Let's get to the next one. Disclaimer: in accordance with the Copyright Act of the United States of America, sections 106, 106A, 107, and the others. Fair use. I have a right to use videos, pictures, images, and materials and the like, etc. For criticism, comments, new reportings, teaching, scholarships, and research, this information is now a matter of public record. Let me say that again. This information is now a matter of public record in accordance to the United States of America Freedom of Information Act. All right, stock market crash. What caused the Great Depression? Here are some of the things that caused the Great Depression. Stock market crash in 1929. Bank panics. That means bank runs. That's people withdrawing large sums of money or all of their monies out of banks. That was taking place. Tariffs placed on agricultural and industrial products internationally, which led to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930s. Okay, they passed that. Okay, so business owners and the industrial and the agricultural industries in the United States of America were lobbying for more tariffs. All right, in the 1920s and in the 1930s. In the 1930s, Congress actually passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930s. Okay, remember all of this is what contributed to the Great Depression and the gold standard or the devaluing of countries' currencies. All right, because The United States, in the way that they were doing trade, it was gold, right? Gold was the currency then. Well, what happened is they began to stop all this up on themselves. It excluded other nations. They began to devalue other nations' currency because they couldn't get as much as the US could or other countries could, like Europe. So Europe was Britain, Great Britain, let me be specific, over in Europe was the one who began to get rid of the gold standard. They got rid of the gold standard first, and then when Roosevelt was elected as president, he followed, right? They got rid of that type of currency. So we see similarities in what happened then and what's going on now. We see the stock market crash over here in the United States of America. We looked at that, right? We looked at that yesterday. Uh, as far as bank panics and bank runs, everybody running out to the bank, we haven't had that so far. But as things begin to progressively get worse, it could happen. All right, tariffs. We see tariffs being placed straight across the board on every industry, basically. And what is also happening, the devaluing of other countries' currency. That is going on right now, too. That will probably become more and more prevalent. It's 11 nations. I'll say it again. It is 11 countries that no longer value the US dollar. All right. They are no longer valuing or honoring the US currency. So, all right, stock market crash of 1929. On October 24th, 1929, nervous investors began selling overpriced shares en masse. The stock market crash had happened at last. A record 12.9 million shares were traded that day, known as Black Thursday. What has been going on since Trump has been back in the White House? You see investors, some investors have been very nervous. They started dishing the Tesla stock and other stocks, tech stocks. But now we're not just dealing with national investors, we're dealing with international investors too, right? What did they begin doing? Getting rid of US stocks. And what started happening? Markets started declining, right? It hasn't bottomed out yet, but it's in the negatives. 5 days later, on October the 29th, or Black Tuesday, some 16 million shares were traded. After another wave of panic swept Wall Street, millions of shares ended up worthless. And those investors who had bought stocks on margin with borrowed money were wiped out complete. So some people have already lost their money in the stock market completely since Don the Con has been back in there. Pinocchio #1 is what I refer to him as. What is it? The stock market, trillions of dollars have been lost, just wiped out in the stock market, from the stock market so far since Don the Con is in there talking about trillions of dollars. When I checked it today, it was in the trillions. It was past $5 trillion. Wiped away, gone. It's gone. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So compare that where we are today to what was going on during the Great Depression in the 1920s and 30s. See the similarities? As consumer confidence vanished, what is happening? Consumers' confidence is dwindling in the wake of the stock market crash, but consumers' confidence was dwindling when the price of eggs did not come down, when the cost of nothing was coming down. And so you take a combination of everything that's going on and you say, okay, we're on the precipice of another Great Depression. Someone with some good sense, common sense, and who knows what they're talking about don't get a hold this administration, that's where we will be. It's just a matter of time. How long did the Great Depression last? It lasted 10 years. Let me say it again. The Great Depression lasted for 10 years. Okay. The downturn of spending and investment led factories and other businesses to slow down production and begin firing workers. What do we see? Uh, Workers are being laid off. Not federal workers have been fired by persons who really had no authority to do so, but that's being litigated in court. But let's talk about the tariffs impact, the stock market impact. What do we see? Businesses, companies are beginning to what? Lay off people. People are being laid off. Some companies are completely dissolving themselves and going out of business. Uh-oh. Excuse me, everyone. I had to turn that alarm off in the back. Apologies, everyone. I had to turn that alarm off in the back and almost ended up shaking. Okay, so again, we're talking about comparison and contrast. We see the similarities. We're looking at the correlations of what happened during the Great Depression and what's going on now. All right, we see it. For those who were lucky enough to remain employed, wages fell and buying power decreased. Many Americans forced to buy on credit fell into debt, and the number of foreclosures and repossessions climbed steadily. The global adherence to, and it should be the gold standard, the gold standard, which drawing countries around the world in a fixed currency exchange, helped spread economic woes from the United States throughout the world, especially in Europe. Now, women were underpaid during the Great Depression. Black people got let go first. Rich and melanated people like myself got let go first. And we were definitely greatly underpaid. So when you talk about the Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s, Black people had it worse. So multiply that. Okay. 10 plus times worse than everybody else. And I hear people saying, oh, this is just great for us. No, it's not. No, it's not. This is costing. The decisions being made, White House, this administration is extremely costing. Okay, White House officials have said that foreign companies will observe the cost of tariffs. But the National Study Bureau of Economics, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, found that's not what happened during Trump's first term as president, when costs were mostly passed on to businesses and consumers, because that's what happens. At least initially, automakers are approaching tariffs differently. Okay, so you have Ford, you have Stellantis, you have GM, you have Hyundai, you have other manufacturers who are approaching the tariff situation differently, right? Okay. The road ahead, Stellantis, which makes Jeep, Dodge, Ram, trucks, and Chrysler, announced a temporary halt in production. Remember, during the Great Depression, we just read it. What was going on? A halt in production. Even though it's a temporary halt so far at some of its assembly plants in Mexico and Canada. As a result, the company said 900 people would be temporarily laid off at several Stellantis factories in Michigan and Indiana. Okay, and this is just their starting point, right? As the domino effect continues, we will see how it is going to unfold and fall. All right. When tariffs happened in the 1920s and 30s, guess what? It was a tit for tat. Yeah, yeah. Now, let's fast forward to today's time. Well, other nations are developed now. United States isn't the greatest developed nation anymore. So what's happening? You're gonna have that tit for tat. Other countries like, okay, you come with your tariffs, I got mine too. Because what China said was this: you do 34% on us, we got 34% on you coming starting April the 10th. That's the way we doing it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you see other nations, Canada saying, coming with your tariffs, we coming with ours. Mexico, you got your tariffs, we have ours. Other countries are saying, if US wants to impose, this administration wants to impose tariffs right back at you, what does that start? A trade war. Who does it help? No one. What nation is this type of trade war going to help? Because the thing that's dangerous today is this: other nations they don't have to do trade with the United States of America. They can go somewhere else and trade with other countries and completely eliminate us out of that equation. Okay? What do we have as a nation that no other nation has? Or some of these other countries that, what do we have that nobody else has over here today? What do we have? Yeah, think about it. Okay, so Bangkok, countries and industries were scrambling Friday to respond as Trump, because I'm not calling him a president, latest tariff hikes upended global trade and world markets. China responded to 34% tariffs imposed by the US on imports from China by announcing it was imposed 34% tariffs on imports of all US products beginning April the 10th. Right back at you. That's what they're saying. Right back at you. You going, we're gonna go tit for tat. Taiwan's president promised to provide support to industries most vulnerable to the 32% tariffs Trump ordered in his Liberation Day. Reciprocal tariffs announced. Okay, so reciprocity. We're gonna give it back to you. That's what these other nations are saying. You impose your tariffs, USA. We got ours. We're coming right back at you. All right, import, export, coming right back at you. We have our own. Yeah. As with earlier counter moves to the USA trade penalties, Beijing hit back with targeted action as well as its universal 34% tariff on all products from the US. The Commerce Ministry in Beijing said that it will impose more export controls on rare earths, which are materials used in high-tech products such as computer chips, electric vehicle batteries, including on the list with samarium and its compound, which are used in aerospace manufacturing and in the defense sector, military. That's military. If you want to know what the defense sector is, military. That's what that's referring to. So now they're hitting back. Like, okay, we're going to affect your desktop, laptops, smartphones, refrigerators, washing machines, dryers, cars. We have parts for the things that you all utilize over there. We're going to increase it. Who's going to incur that cost? The cost gets rolled over to whom? U.S. citizens and a business owner. The business owners are going to roll it over on a U.S. citizen. No business owner is going to sit up there and just simply incur all of that cost unless there's a way. And Ford is trying. Ford is offering, if you need a vehicle right now, Ford is offering discounts. They are offering everybody who was purchasing a car from them the employee discount. You can get their employee discount. You don't have to have a family member who works there right now or a friend. You can get the Ford employee discount right now if you are purchasing a vehicle for them. That's what they have begun to do so far. Okay, that's just one of their moves strategically. But who's going to eat these costs? And then other elements called gadolinium used in MRI scans. Now that hits the medical field. That hits the medical field. So you have medical equipment going up. China's Customs Administration said it had suspended imports of chicken from 2 U.S. suppliers. Okay. Montero Farms of Delaware and Coastal Processing. So that's agriculture, right? Yeah. They said we don't we don't want what you was supplying China with. We don't want. See, you're starting a war, a trade war, right? And so what are those people doing? But no, people said they voted for him based on and contingent on the price of eggs. Okay, how is that working out for you now? It said Chinese customs had repeatedly detected Frozidone, a drug banned in China, and shipments from those countries. Wow. Now, this is what I was talking about yesterday. Comparison and contrast. One of the things I was mentioning is comparing the president and where they stood. All right. This is the S&P comparison by president, starting from the 1980s to 2025. All right. So you had Reagan, and remember, S&P 500 largest businesses or enterprise on the stock market, okay? And how it is faring with them. All right, Reagan, you've seen gains, and Lord have mercy knows Reagan. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'll say that for another day. So we had Reagan. We had George Bush Sr. In the 90s. We had Clinton. You see gains, right? And remember, this is rise over run, right? Rise, we have the percentage. Run, we have the years, okay? Rise over run. We have the vertical and the horizontal line, okay? Rise over run, all right? So we're looking at the percentages by year, by presidential terms, okay? So then you had Clinton elected twice, Reagan elected twice, George Bush Sr. only elected once. Then you had George Bush Jr. elected twice. Now, what do you see on the S&P? You see the negatives. It's on the decline for George Bush, first term as president and second term as president. And remember, when he was in office, we had no job growth the way we should have had in the United States of America. The housing industry was carrying us. And when that declined, the Great Recession is what happened, right? A Great Recession happened, right? letting the record show. All right. So, and it was not just a national, again, impact, it was a international impact because monies are tied in together. Other nations invest in our stock market. It's been that way for years. They had their money invested and tied into this too. So when it declined for Americans who have their money in the stock market in the US, the other nations who have their money invested over here in products, or businesses, they feel the impact too. So George Bush almost to negative 40, almost in the negative 30s, right? Just nothing. So we had President Obama twice, terms, got in there, started transcending upward. Then you have Trump who comes behind him, upward. It wasn't because of anything he did, because he didn't come behind a George Bush. He came behind a former President Barack Obama, who was handed a crappy economy. Right? We looking at the statistics, right? Some of the stats anyway. We letting the record show. He came behind a brilliant, intelligent, rich and melanated black man who had to pull the U.S., him and his administration had to pull the U.S. up out of a slump, or else we would have been into another Great Depression. It would have been another Great Depression, right? So Trump gets in one term, piggybacking off of President Obama's terms. He gets handed a decent economy, right? Fairly decent, okay economy, right? Not in the negatives. Biden gets in under Trump. Okay. Topsy-turvy. Trump started some tariff wars with China. And so China began to cut off some of his agricultural goods coming in from the US. And they said, okay, you come and tariffs with us like that, we giving it right back to you. We're giving it right back to you. So he started some mess back then. Biden, Trump hadn't even been in there for a good 5 months. Where are we now? On the S&P, back in the negatives. I'm just letting the record show. We're doing facts over fiction, truth over lies. So let's look at the formula. Before I look at this formula, let me stop the share on this. Let me get to another video. Right, Soup Bum, but they're out there attempting to try to tell other countries what they shouldn't do. Uh, if I was a prime minister or a president of another nation, I would be like, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Because you don't have authority as it relates to anything over in another nation. And so while you say we're going to impose all these tariffs on you, please don't impose them back on us. That's an unrealistic expectation. That's an irrational perspective, theological, unrealistic, irrational, no logic behind that type of reasoning. What logic is it behind that type of reasoning? You think you're just going to tariff here? You get some tariffs, you get some tariffs, 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 and the other nations not gonna say, pause for a minute, slow your roll, pump the brakes. We coming right back at you. We coming right back at you. Okay. So let me get to the video on how he used some artificial intelligence to come up with how he factored, and he didn't do the factoring, uh, tariffs would be imposed nation by nation and country by country. Let me get to that video because I was sitting there, side note, I'm thinking, did any of these people have econ? Did any of them have any econ classes in high school, college? What type of degrees did they really obtain on their own at these universities? Or was somebody else doing that work for them? You cannot be serious. And unfortunately, they are. I'm thinking, where did they go to school at? How did they get passed? Who passed them on? Who conferred a degree upon them? Or what type of degree was it? Because clearly, from this administration, no one is standing out to me as a mathematician because they know better than this. They run numbers all day. No one is standing out to me as a great scientist who deals with statistics, a data scientist who deals with statistics. They would know better than this. No one is standing out to me as a tech guru either, because in the field of technology, we definitely running numbers and using science all day. So we know we don't have I haven't seen any type of economists from this administration come out and say anything that would substantially say, hey, this is what we do. We do the economy. This is our field right here. You're headed down a downward spiral. You're walking us right into another Great Depression, not a recession. You're going to walk us into a Great Depression. All the signs are there. Tariffs, 1920s, 2025, tariffs. Decline in the stock market, 1920s, 2025. Slow down production. Layoffs. Remember, the unemployment rate, the Great Depression lasted 10 years. The unemployment, 15 million people were unemployed. It was over at 25. It was between a 25 and a 30% unemployment rate. Fortunately, we're not there yet. But if this foolishness continues to transpire, we will be there as a nation. And we'll be in a Great Depression. Who thinks this is a good idea? The currency is going to change. It's going to have to. We're in a digital era. All right, let me get to this other video. I just trying to figure out on my side note, were these people passing basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division? I'm just trying to figure that out. All right, let me show the video. Let me pull this back and show this video of how Trump came up with how somebody around him came up with whatever they came up with to factor how tariffs would be imposed on individual nations. I'm gonna let the record show. Let me play the video. Let me play the clip. So,
President Donald Trump has unveiled a sweeping new tariff policy targeting most U.S. trading partners. The plan will set at least a 10% tariff on nearly every country in the world. Some countries will be hit harder than others. President Trump and the White House shared a series of charts on social media showing the tariff rates they say other countries impose on the U.S. and how the U.S. will reciprocate.
How did they get to those tariff rates? I think that when we figured out that was a little puzzling, because what we have confirmed now is the way they got to those rates. There's the formula. It looks kind of complicated, but it's actually rather simple. They took the trade deficit, the administration took the trade deficit and divided it by the imports from that country to the United States, and then assumed that number, that rate that they got, was all the way that their taxes or tariffs.
To a lot of trade experts, Kelly, it's gibberish. That's really the problem. And I called up these trade experts and I said, have you ever heard of this? And they said no. Do you know anybody who's ever used this formula to determine the trade burden or onus or whatever? And everybody said no.
A White House official told reporters on April 2nd, these tariffs are customized to each country, and the numbers have been calculated by the Council of Economic Advisors using very, very well-established methodologies from the international trade economic literature as well as policy practice. The model they use is based on the concept that the trade deficit that we have with any given country is the sum of all the unfair trade practices, the sum of all cheating.
We were all trying to figure out, is this based on value-added taxes? Is this tariffs? It doesn't line up with any known applied trade policies. It took people who weren't actually steeped in this day to day to say, hey, this is just correlated with trade balances. The White House is naming all of these policies they're supposedly reciprocating against. Those show up in no form or fashion in that formula at all. It's simply just looking at bilateral trade balances in goods, which has nothing to do overall with trade policy.
The administration calculated each country's tariff rate using this formula. The tariff rate equals the U.S. trade deficit with that country divided by the U.S. imports from that country. For example, the U.S. claims that China charges a tariff of 67%. The U.S. ran a goods trade deficit of $295.4 billion with China in 2024, while imported goods were worth $438.9 billion. When you divide $295.4 billion by $438.9 billion, the result is 67%, just like the graphic the administration posted.
Chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating, but we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us.
The idea was essentially that any type of trade deficit that the U.S. economy would have with any trading partner would be perceived as essentially an unfair advantage that the U.S. would be given to another economy. And that's why they use the trade deficit relative to imports from that economy as the basis for these reciprocal tariffs. When you're just focused on trade deficits vis-a-vis trading partners, and you're trying to bring these trade deficits down to zero, you're essentially starting a trade conflict that is very similar to what we call as economists a beggar thy neighbor type of policy, because every other economy is going to want to react in the same fashion and thus impose its own tariffs. And so what that leads to is an environment where the general cost of doing trade globally increases, inflation dynamics are reignited, and that leads to demand destruction globally. So we end up in a world that experiences higher inflation and lower growth. And that type of policy is detrimental to U.S. economic activity, but also global economic activity.
President Trump has made it clear his goal is to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but that could be a slow process.
This is just the latest episode in a years-long era of supply chain volatility that we have seen drive major firms to already shorten and diversify supply chains to the United States. We expect the tariffs to continue accelerating that trend. That being said, this uncertainty in trade policy, along with other areas, is driving a lot of other major corporates to pause investment decisions, pause leasing decisions, because of the uncertainty involved.
Economists warn that a trade war could have serious implications for the U.S. and the global economy.
The tariffs will create a tax burden on the U.S. economy, and it will be shared by workers and by business owners. Some companies may be able to pass their tariff costs on to retail prices. Others won't. They'll have to eat that cost. It reduces their revenues, their profits, which means they might have to cut hiring. They might have to cut returns to shareholders. So in either way, whether the cost is passed forward or passed backward, it's American workers and American business owners who bear that burden.
We're now going back to an era where essentially each country would be forced, in a sense, to produce more domestically, even if that leads to heightened inefficiencies and a higher cost of trade globally.
It was tried in the United States of America, the 1920s and the 1930s. That's what led to the Great Depression. That's one of the things that led, one of the main reasons we had a Great Depression, one of the key factors we had a Great Depression. Been there and done that as a nation. It did not work. It did not work then, and it's not going to work now. It's not going to work. Isolationism. You call that being isolated, isolating yourself as a nation, saying, oh, what natural resources in terms of minerals does the U.S. have over here? Does anybody know? What are we supplying to other nations that they don't have? Does anyone know? Does anyone know? So you have to look at it sector by sector. You have to look at what we're trading with other countries. You have to look at what they have over there that we don't have, that we don't have access to, that keeps our televisions, internet, cell phones, transportation, and other things that keeps us going as a nation. You have to sit down and say, okay, a computer is made of something. Okay. These parts that are needed to make these computers comes from the earth. Natural minerals. That comes from the earth. Produced, altered, made into something that can go inside of our computers, our smartphones, cell phones, cars. Do we have it over here? Do we have it over here? You have to begin to ask questions like that. People saying, well, we got a bunch of oil over here, bunch of this, bunch of that, bunch of that. We call that, okay, can we get to it? Can we get to it without causing casualties and without humans losing their lives because we're trying to get to it? Because from a geographic perspective, and I'm not talking about geology, territorial, geography, excuse me, territorial. I'm talking about geology, right? Dealing with the Earth's surfaces. The lower you go below the Earth's surface, the hotter it gets. I mean, my side note, what, we want to have a bunch of volcanoes over here? Eruptions. That's going to produce some resources, because you know what happens when you have a volcano, what's underneath the ground begins to come up. It all comes up and it's just, once it cools down, it's just right there for us to get. Some people don't even wait for it to cool down. They're trained. They just go out there and they can get it. God bless them. That ain't my gift. Anyway, so we have to start thinking rationally. We have to start saying, okay, what are we what are we trading? What do we have? What's the big trade off? What's the trade off? And if we stop trading with them, what's going to happen? Have we gotten to the point where we can produce these things on our own in a sustainable way, or are we just being unrealistic at this point? Are we being irrational, unrealistic? We don't have a plan of action that we can execute. We just have concepts of a plan. And while we have concepts of a plan, it is driving and walking us into a recession, which is going to lead to a Great Depression because we're starting trade wars. Like they did in the 1920s and 30s, which led to a Great Depression that lasted 10 years. Okay. Okay. And that's it. That's it for this one. Trust me, it is a lot more information I have, a lot more graphs. We can get down to the nitty gritty and run the numbers for real. We can start running some numbers for real. We can go state by state. And during the Great Depression, I want you to keep in mind African American people were the most disenfranchised because the legislation that was passed at the federal level was being administered at the local level. And so the help and the good and services that African American people should have been getting at the local level, they were being denied of racism. Yeah. The resources weren't getting to them. But a resilient people, our ancestors were, those of us who are of African descent. We had the Renaissance period that popped up during that Great Depression time in New York, and they had it going. Okay. We had other Black Wall Street. We had other things that came along and had it going as a people, as an ethnic group, because our ancestors had to. They were being factored out, even though, like I said, the federal law was there. And on my last note, I want to say this before I get off. Remember, when Roosevelt came in there, he got rid of the gold standard for a reason. Okay, he said, let's get rid of this currency. It's caustic. Now, that's when you say it's going to hurt in the short term, but it's going to be beneficial in the long term. He came in with plans because he said, his administration said, wait a minute. Wait. Let's start factoring some stuff in. Roughly 15 million people, millions of people unemployed. We have to start doing some things. We have seniors. We have people who are disabled. They came up with welfare program. And some people say, you on welfare. It was welfare program that deal with the wellness of a society. That was society government stepping in to take care of its citizens like they should. Okay. And so you had, let me go to my other side. What did I want to say on that point? I wrote it down because I have so much to say. Let me see if I can find it. A whole lot to say on that. But I wrote down a specific point that I wanted to bring up when it came to that. We had welfare programs being created. Social Security was created, right? Seniors, they had to survive some type of way. All right. pay into it. When you get old, you have some money coming back to you. We had disability. You become disabled, you have to have some type of fund in some type of way. You can't just cash your way. So social welfare programs were created for the well-being, the government looking out for its citizens, for the well-being of its citizens beyond the Great Depression that they had to work their way out of, which the US began to work its way out of during the Second World War, World War II, because mass production came into place during the wartime, right? And that the US steadily began to climb its way back out of that Great Depression, out of the negatives into the positive in terms of industry over here, right? And international standing. So again, you have to factor in a lot of things, comparison and a contrast. And again, this is a topic that you could sit down and discuss every day for the next 5 years straight and run all type of analysis, and you will sit back and be like, oh, so we're comparison and contrasting this. Do we really want to go down that road again? Should we really be going down that road again as a nation? And yes, I listen to people present counter arguments as to why tariffs are needed, but I was like, no, you. Mm-mm. So, having said that, I won't belabor the point. You all have a pleasant evening and a pleasant night. Remember to begin to get your resources, your stockpile going on. You know what you have need of in your home, whether it's food, paper towel, clothes. You know what you have need of. So begin to get your resources together so you can be prepared for what's about to take place. A lot of people have already been stocking up on meats and other things, but things that you are so easy to readily get, just think of those things becoming unavailable. What if they be probability and the possibility, right? Quantitative and qualitative thinking, reasoning, and measuring. Possibility it may happen because it happened before, or there's a possibility it just may happen because we live in this nation and we're humans and things change. So you have to factor stuff in. All right. You all have a pleasant evening and a pleasant night. Remember to stay vigilant. Remember to get your resources together as much as you possibly can. And remember to stay actively engaged. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a pleasant night. Thank you so much for joining us in this stream. And you can always go back. For those of you who didn't catch it in real time, you can always go back, slow it down,